And today's session is going to focus on tobacco use transitions. So I welcome you all and I thank you all for joining. Just some preliminary logistics for today and some background about our pilot projects program. Of course, we're supported by the FDA to deliver these pilot project program funds to new and early stage investigators. And this program is also funded in part by our School of Public Health and our Rogels Cancer Center at the University of Michigan. We've funded 21 projects over the last 4 years for a total of about $750,000. Today, we're going to do lightning talk sessions on the topic of tobacco use transitions and highlighting just 4 projects of the 21. There is an events page for these sessions, so please go to that page to learn a little bit more about the speakers, their projects, and the slides are uploaded there as well. And after the session is over, we will post a recording of the session there too. And Molly, if you don't mind, could you chat that link so people can access it if they like? Just some more information here about the talks. Yesterday, we had the tobacco use among youth session. Today is tobacco use transitions and tobacco-related disparities, which will happen at 1 p.m. today. So I encourage you all to attend the third session as well. Just some logistical issues. Each presenter will get about 5 to 10 minutes to do their talk. Slides or e-posters are available on our event website, as I mentioned earlier. We will have a Q&A session, but we'll do that after everybody speaks. But you can chat your questions in the chat function throughout the whole hour. And you can ask questions live during the Q&A period, either by chatting or by raising your hand. We will send out an evaluation of this event after today's third session, so please fill it out. It'll help us, assess quality and reach and so forth of our variety of different events through our T-Course site. These are the 4 talks. I'm going to introduce the first speaker today and his talk. So let me just stop sharing here and switch over. So our first speaker here is Dr. Andrew Brouwer from the University of Michigan. He's going to speak about determinants of tobacco use transitions among smokers and dual users of cigarettes and e-cigarettes. Dr. Brouwer is a computational epidemiologist and modeler. He's an assistant research scientist in the Department of Epidemiology at the U of M. He earned his PhD in applied and interdisciplinary mathematics at the University of Michigan in 2015. And he also holds an MA in statistics and an MS in environmental sciences and engineering. Dr. Brouwer's research focuses on mathematical and statistical modeling for inference in epidemiology with the goal of making the most of dynamic data for the benefit of public health. He's an expert in methods that address questions of parameter identifiability, estimation, and uncertainty. Informed by his interdisciplinary background, his research spans a growing constellation of applications in areas such as infectious diseases, cancer, and tobacco control. Dr. Brouwer's work examines longitudinal patterns and dynamics and uses differential equation models, multi-state transition models, and age period cohort models, among others. Andrew, please start whenever you are ready.
Great. Thank you, Ritesh. Thanks for that introduction. So as Ritesh said, I'll be telling you about my pilot project investigating the determinants of tobacco use transitions among smokers and dual users of cigarettes and e-cigarettes. Thank you to the Castor for the pilot project, and this is work in collaboration with the University of Wisconsin. The idea behind this work is investigating what the barriers and facilitators of quitting smoking are for dual users of cigarettes and e-cigarettes. So the idea of harm reduction would be that e-cigarettes can replace cigarettes. Many cigarette users go through a period of dual use, and the question is, how do these dual users transition in the future? Do they go back to the cigarettes? Do they remain dual users? Or do they have that harm reduction outcome with cigarette cessation? The data we're using here come from the University of Wisconsin's Exhale study, which recruited 422 adults who were cigarette or dual users of cigarettes and e-cigarettes, and followed them every 2 months for 2 years, tracking their product transitions. One note is that this study occurred in 2015 to 2017, and so is pre-Juul, but we think that the results are still useful. We can see here in the lower left-hand corner these transitions over time, where most participants remain in their state, but particularly dual users may kind of transition back and forth between cigarette and dual use. The methods and analysis that I'm using here are multi-state transition models, and these allow us to identify the factors that make transitions more or less likely. As an example, we can take an individual and recognize that they can transition between different patterns of use. So maybe in this example, we have a dual user who transitions to cigarette use by quitting their e-cigarette. They make a quit attempt, but relapse, and another quit attempt later. We don't observe these specific times of transition, even to the extent that these transitions are distinct occurrences. But what we do observe are what products they're using at the specific times of the study visit. And so what we would see is that they have a dual use, 2 cigarette use, and a non-current use visit. And so if we can aggregate many of these longitudinal patterns, we can say in general, the propensities to transition between different patterns of use are greater or smaller, and how those propensities depend on behaviors or sociodemographics. And what we find is that regardless of e-cigarette use, it's harder to quit cigarettes when you're highly dependent, or if your partner smokes. So these are important barriers. We also find that being dependent on your e-cigarette doesn't make it easier to quit cigarettes. It just makes it harder to quit your e-cigarette. And this has implications for using e-cigarettes for cigarette cessation. What we do find, though, is that dual users were more likely to quit cigarettes if they were highly motivated to do so, if they used their e-cigarette before their cigarette on most days. That's kind of an indication of preference. Or if the dual users enjoyed the sensory, social, or emotional aspects of the e-cigarette, so that there are aspects beyond just that physical craving that draws them to it. We also found that there's typically a period after starting or stopping that cigarette or e-cigarette during which relapse or further transition is more likely. In these 3 graphs, I'm plotting hazard ratios that indicate that as these curves go more towards the bottom of the graph, participants are less likely to transition over time. And so that's important because if we're trying to potentially suggest people use e-cigarettes, that they use them for at least a couple of months before giving them up, or more importantly, make multiple cigarette quit attempts, and that it's important to make multiple attempts. So ultimately, we feel that understanding the barriers and facilitators of transitions can help us to develop regulations and also interventions that lead to the more effective use of e-cigarettes for smoking cessation. This pilot project has resulted in a published paper, a submitted paper, and one in preparation, many led by a PhD student in biostatistics that I've been working with and mentoring. We have 4 conference posters, several webinars, and instructional workshop. And this has contributed to my career in that I'll co-lead the data analytics and modeling core in our submitted review of the Center for the Assessment of Tobacco Regulations U54 Center, and in a planned R21 submission for this March. So thank you so much for coming and listening to my talk. Here's our published work, and stay tuned for our future work. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Andrew. Excellent talk. We'll move on to the next speaker here. Let's see. So the next will be Dr. Xu, or Violet Zhu. She'll be talking about identifying causal pathways in longitudinal tobacco product transition studies. Dr. Zhu is a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Biostatistics at the School of Global Public Health at New York University. She's a quantitative psychologist who uses longitudinal methods. She completed her postdoc at Prevention Methodology at the Methodology Center at Pennsylvania State University. After joining NYU, she has served as a biostatistician/investigator on more than 10 federally and locally funded research projects. Her research has focused on developing and applying statistical methods for longitudinal data, missing data, causal inference, and intervention program evaluation. She has rich experience in longitudinal data analysis, including analyzing data from the PATH study. Our pilot research project examines the longitudinal effect of e-cigarette exposure on subsequent tobacco use patterns using conventional and causal mediation methods. She's also a co-investigator of a NIH NCI R21 award that assesses the longitudinal impact of e-cigarette flavor, device, and marketing exposure on tobacco use and health outcomes using propensity score weighting and causal mediation methods. She has published articles in leading statistical journals as well as tobacco control journals. Dr. Zhu, you may present when you are ready.
Thank you, Radish. Thank you for having me here. I'm so happy to present our work transition of e-cigarette use to subsequent tobacco use among U.S. our causal mediation analysis, and this study is supported by the CASTOR pilot project. So this is the outline of today's talk. E-cigarettes are the predominant tobacco products among use in the United States since 2014. In our previous study, as well as a few others, we found e-cigarettes are associated with elevated risk of using cigarettes among youth. After the initiation of e-cigarette use, adolescents quickly transited to cigarette use. However, we don't know much about what is the mechanism underlying this transition. So the objective of the project is to explain why and assess the extent to which e-cigarette use has an impact on the subsequent tobacco product use. We have a few main research questions. The first one is about total effect. What is the total effect of e-cigarette initiation versus tobacco naive on current tobacco use after 2 years? And second question is about a mediated effect. We wonder what is the total effect mediated by the e-cigarette induced change in mediator. We want to identify mediators. And also how much would the current tobacco use change if participants perceive e-cigarette to be less harmful than cigarettes compared to if participants perceive e-cigarette as equally or more harmful than cigarettes. So this is particularly about one of the mediator we are interested in, which is the relative harm of e-cigarette use as compared to cigarettes. To answer these questions, we conducted a secondary data analysis using the first 4 annual waves of the public use data from the population assessment of tobacco and the health study. Participants were tobacco naive at wave 1 and e-cigarette initiators and tobacco naive use at wave 4. So we end up with 7,500 participants who were aged 12 to 17 years as a baseline. We conducted both traditional mediation analysis and the causal mediation analysis. The analysis was conducted in a few R packages. This is how we define the study variables. So we selected a variable from multiple waves to satisfy the temporal order of variables. The exposure variable is assessed at wave 2. It's e-cigarette initiation status. 1 indicates yes and 0 is no. And the mediator was assessed at wave 3. Participants responded to the item. Is using e-cigarette less harmful, about the same, or more harmful than smoking cigarettes? So one indicates e-cigarette being less harmful, which we consider as the correct perception of harm of e-cigarette use. 0 indicates e-cigarette being about the same or more harmful than cigarettes. The outcome was measured in the next wave 4. It's about current tobacco use status. 1 indicate yes and 0 is no. And also we carefully controlled for our list of confounders, which were measured at wave 1, which includes the demographics and the substance use history, asthma history, and so on. So we ran mediation analysis of the model presented in this slide. We hypothesized that in comparison to who never used e-cigarettes at wave 2, e-cigarette users would be more likely to perceive e-cigarette use as less harmful than cigarettes, and in turn would be more likely to be current users at wave 4. And we want to explain why we conduct a causal mediation analysis. It's for a few reasons. The definition and the identification of causal effects are independent of analytical model, which is different from the traditional approach. And also a longitudinal design allowed the temporal order of exposure and the effect. We also are aware of that software and tutorials become more available for public use, and our team has a paper, has a tutorial paper on those methods, which is currently under review. And we also like the transparent and the rigorous nature of the modeling process, which allow reproducible evidence to inform tobacco policy making. And in contrast, when the study variables, especially the mediator and the outcome, which is our case, are binary, the conventional mediation analysis is more technically demanding, and the results is very difficult to be interpreted. So it's not as helpful for policymaking. And the results, among the 7.3% of youth who initiated e-cigarette use at wave 2, close to half perceived e-cigarette use as less harmful than cigarettes at wave 3, and 33% become current tobacco users at wave 4. Among the reference group who stayed tobacco naive at wave 2, we have less participants perceived e-cigarette as less harmful than cigarette use at wave 3, and then much smaller proportion of participants, 9.4%, become current tobacco users at wave 4. So both traditional method and convention and the causal mediation analysis give us the total effect of e-cigarette use on the outcome, which is 17.5% increase in the risk of current tobacco use. The adjusted odds of current tobacco use among e-cigarette user is 3.69 times the odds among the reference group. When we take the causal mediation analysis, we were able to get the specific quantities of the mediated effect. So the mediated effect on current tobacco use was due to the e-cigarette induced change in the mediator, which is harm perception. That corresponded to 1.11 times the adjusted odds of current tobacco use. This accounts for 9.3 of the total effect. So based on Cohen's effect size, this is kind of like a median size effect. However, we cannot get this information from the traditional mediation analysis. What we know is just the e-cigarette initiation is associated with our increased higher odds of perceiving e-cigarette as less harmful than cigarette. And that perception leads to higher odds of tobacco current use. But the size of mediated effect is unclear, and we cannot get that estimation from the traditional methods. So the conclusion, harm perception significantly mediated the association between e-cigarette initiation and a subsequent combustible, current tobacco use. Results help to provide important empirical evidence to inform policy making and intervention development. And in the future study, I would like to continue my work on implementing and disseminating causal inference methods to improve public health for health equity. I would like to take our causal machine learning approach to leverage the big data from the large-scale epidemiological tobacco product use studies. And this is my research team. I work closely with Dr. Donna Kaufman, George Luta, and Ray Naira. They give me a lot of support when we conduct the study. And also, I sincerely appreciated the funding from Castor pilot grant. This gave me the opportunity to conduct this interesting project. Hello?
Great. Thank you. I wasn't sure if you were done.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We'll go to the next speakers. This specific talk will be presented by two speakers, Dr. Mona Issabakhsh and Dr. Thuy Lei. They will be speaking about predicting smoking behaviors using machine learning. Dr. Issabakhsh, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, is currently a research investigator in the Department of Oncology at Georgetown University School of Medicine and a member of CASTOR. Her work is focused on tobacco simulation modeling and using machine learning algorithms to predict and analyze tobacco use behaviors. She has a BS, MS, and PhD degree in industrial engineering and received her PhD from the University of Miami, focusing on simulation-based optimization of outpatient scheduling. During her undergraduate and graduate studies, she conducted operations research in medical decision-making and healthcare planning using mathematical, statistical, and machine learning tools. And the second speaker for this talk is Dr. Thuy Lei. She's an assistant research scientist at the University of Michigan Department of Health Management and Policy. She's also a member of CASTOR. Dr. Lei is interested in mathematical modeling for cancer and tobacco-related problems and machine learning applications in tobacco regulatory science. She's developed mathematical models to evaluate the benefits and harms of breast cancer mammography and to predict the number of white blood cells during acute lymphoblastic maintenance therapy in pediatric cancer patients. Dr. Lei's recent work focused on mathematical models to quantify the public health burden of menthol cigarettes and estimate the smoking cessation rates. Dr. Lei is working on applying machine learning techniques to predict and understand smoking behaviors. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So hi, everyone. I'm gonna present our pilot project entitled Machine Learning Applications for Predicting a Smoking Cessation Among U.S. Adults to You. This work is funded by CASTOR, and you can see the list of our co-authors here. So I believe that you keep hearing about the application of machine learning in different research fields, including tobacco research. So machine learning is a powerful tool because it enables you to develop accurate predictive models using multiple variables and using a multiple combination of variables. And here in this project, we are specifically interested in applying machine learning to determine the determinants of a smoking cessation and to develop predictive models for smoking cessation. So we applied PAT data set to develop our predictive models. You can see our analytical sample here. We considered current established smokers in wave 1 of PAT data and then track the smoking cessation for those individuals in wave 2. So as you can see, around 9,000 individuals were current established smokers in wave 1 of PAT, and then around 700 of those participants quitted smoking in wave 2, and 8,500 did not quit. So their quit rate was very low, around 7%. Therefore, we had to employ random sampling techniques such as random under and oversampling and ensemble-based methods such as bagging to develop our predictive models and to find the variables, the important variables of a smoking cessation in our analysis. So we ended up developing predictive models with algorithms such as random forest, gradient boosting machines, generalized linear regression, and extreme gradient boosting algorithms. And we evaluated the performance of these models using metrics such as sensitivity, which shows the ability of the model to predict quit cases or successful quit cases, specificity, which shows the ability of the model to predict unsuccessful quit cases, and balance accuracy and area under ROC curve, which both detect the ability of the model to predict both successful and unsuccessful quit cases. And as you can see here, a random forest model with bagging outperformed the rest of the models and was able to reach like higher than 70% for all of those performance metrics. And here you can see the ROC curve of all the models. One of the biggest objectives of our analysis was to find the determinants of the smoking cessation, and like algorithms such as random forest and gradient boosting can give you the importance of each of the variables, but what they can't give you is the direction of importance of each of the variables. So how each variable affect smoking cessation. Therefore, for the directionality, we did additional analysis, which is called SHAP analysis. And on the left side here, you can see the most important variables detected by random forest and gradient boosting in our analysis. And on the right, you can see the summary, the SHAP summary plot. In the summary plot, a lighter color show lower value of each variable and darker color show higher value of each variable. On the other side, SHAP values greater than 0 show positive association, and SHAP values less than 0 show negative association. So for instance, here you can see that more past 30 days use of e-cigarette at the time of quit in our analysis was associated with higher chances of a smoking cessation.
Moni, you have just under a minute.
Okay, so this project helped me a lot. Like it gave me so many new ideas for extending our work for papers, and also I'm developing an application for a KO1 award based on this project. One interesting idea is to look at in our project, we looked at the determinants of a smoking cessation over just 1 year. But one way that we can extend this project is by looking at the determinants of long-term cessation. So what causes people to stay quitted for multiple years, not just for 1 year. And this is one way that I see that we can extend this work. Also, we have one paper that is submitted and is under review based on this work, but the preprint is available. Feel free to read the preprint for more details about our work. And thank you so much. Please let me know if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mona. I think Thuy is next to discuss the other portion of this study.
Okay, so can you see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
yeah. So thanks for the nice introduction earlier, Ritesh. And thanks to everyone for being here today. And also we would like to thank the Castro for giving us this opportunity to pursue our research interest. And sorry if my voice sounds terrible today. Okay, so Mona and I are working on the same pilot project, while Mona focuses on smoking cessation. So in this work, I will, focus on smoking initiation. Okay, so in this project, we use the path survey, and we would like to predict smoking initiation between two consecutive path waves among adult never smokers at baseline, and try to identify relevant predictors of this smoking behavior. So with that, we started with the baseline population, which contains only individuals who never try smoking even one or two puffs of a cigarette. And we refer to them as never smokers. And the outcome of interest is, the current smoking status in the past 30 days in the follow-up wave. And so here we analyzed two pairs of waves. Waves 1 and 2, and then waves 4 and 5. So we would like to focus on the earliest waves, and also the latest, the more recent pair of waves to see the stability of the predictors. And here we started by removing non-relevant variables such as personal identity number, random questions, sample weights, etc. And then we removed also variables with too many missing values due to various reasons, including pattern skipping. And we also excluded individuals with missing smoking status in the outcome waves. Okay, so this is how the data look like after, data processing. So here we obtained for waves 1 and 2 around 200 predictors. For wave 4 and 5, we obtained around 300 predictors. And only this small portion of never smokers from the baseline wave became current past 30-day smokers in the outcome waves. Yeah. Okay, so what we did, so for each pair of waves, we used a random forest classifier combined with recursive feature elimination to obtain a subset of predictors. With that, the random forest classifier performs best. And then we will train our random forest using only the selected predictors, not all the, predictors from the path data.
Do you have about a minute, but take the time that you need.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. And here we obtain, after feature selection, we obtain only 60 relevant variables. And we found that across the considered waves, 3 factors, BMI, dental, oral health status, and taking anti-inflammatory or pain medication appeared as the significant predictors of this smoking initiation besides other well-studied predictors. And this is the performance of our classifiers. You see that so the area under the curve is around 80%, and here is a confidence interval. Okay, so in summary, we started with all possible original path variables. And then we selected only 60 variables strongly associated with the smoking onset. And then we trained our model using these selected variables, and our model performs very well in classifying smoking status. And we found that some, unanticipated predictors of the smoking behavior, like BMI, dental, oral health status, and so taking some medicine. Yeah, so that's all. Thank you so much for giving us again. So thank you so much for giving us this very, unique opportunity to pursue what we would like to do. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Thuy. Great talks, both of you. The next speaker is Dr. Angela Quisenberry. The title of her talk is Substitutability of Cigarettes for Salt and Free-Based ENDS Devices in Young Adult ENDS Users. Amanda Quisenberry is a tobacco regulatory science researcher who incorporates behavioral economics into the experimental methodology used in her research. She's trained in experimental psychology, behavior analysis, behavioral economics, and tobacco regulatory science. She currently holds an FDA CTP-funded R01 award investigating the effect of cigarillo flavor removal from the marketplace among young adult cigarillo users. The R01 has received 2 supplemental grants, which include expanding the sample to include sexual and gender minority women and investigating cigarillo co-use with cannabis. She was previously awarded a FDA CTP-funded R03 investigating the effect of cigarette and e-cigarette flavor removal from the marketplace among menthol smokers. In addition to these 2 federally funded awards, she has received 4 pilot project awards through both internal and external funding sources. She aims to evaluate tobacco policy interventions prior to implementation to assess their impact on consumption and purchasing, with the ultimate goal to inform regulators and other stakeholders about these interventions in the hopes of decreasing cancer incidence among those most affected. Dr. Quisenberry, please begin when you're ready.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, I'm going to make it full screen mode. Thank you for that introduction. And I'd like to start by thanking Castor for the funding to support this project. The title of my talk is Substitutability of Cigarettes for Salt and Free-Based ENDS Devices in Young Adult ENDS Users. A little bit of background, as you guys know, that use of e-cigarettes has exploded since their inception. Questions do remain about transitions from e-cigarette use to cigarette use, especially among young people. And this study uses an experimental paradigm to evaluate the likelihood of switching. Our eligibility criteria for this study was using an ENDS device for 4 or more days a week, which we considered a current salt or free-based end user. They had to be between the ages of 18 and 28. We started this project before federally funded or federal tobacco 21, and that they haven't been a regular smoker in their lifetime. We define that as using at least 4 days a week for at least a 3-month period. And the use of other tobacco products was not exclusionary, but we did record it. This is the experimental tobacco marketplace that we used in this study, and this is a screenshot from one participant's actual session. You can see the e-cigarette up here in the left-hand corner and the other products that were available in the array. The e-cigarette was a changing price product. So after they purchased here at market price at $6.46 for a disposable, they go to the checkout and then they check out just like on Amazon, and with their budget that is determined by their tobacco use, they can purchase any of these products as long as they don't go over. You can see over here, I have the other price conditions. They do go through this purchasing session 5 times where their e-cigarette is from really inexpensive to really expensive. And that's what we use to get our demand curves that you'll see in our next slides. Unfortunately, we only have 9 participants that I'm reporting on today. And that is mostly because of that previous smoking status eligibility criteria. We've had a few no-shows, and then we've had about 10 people who were previous smokers who currently use e-cigarettes who fit in the age range. But here are the characteristics of the participants. You can see the different devices used. Most of them are disposable devices. Our demographic characteristics, about half are male, 3/4 are heterosexual, 90% are white, 100% completed at least some college. And here's the other kicker, 100% are salt-based users. So comparing salt to free is not possible at this time. 90% use ends every day, but 20% said they would try a cigarette soon, and our actual age range is 19 to 25. You can see our dependence measures over here for nicotine dependence, and you can just see the different means that we have determined based on these 9 participants. Let's look at the purchases in the experimental tobacco marketplace. Over on the left, you have purchases of all products, and you can see the purchase of ends in yellow decreases as price increases, as we would expect, and as budget determines what you can purchase. And then you can see a couple of products here that people are purchasing when their e-cigarette is more expensive. So you can see IQOS tobacco in the red line. The blue line, IQOS smooth menthol, is right behind that red line. So someone is purchasing exactly the same as another person there. And then we had some interest at the very highest price in the on mints pouches. And then you can, excuse me, you can see on the right, these are each of our individual ends users and what they're purchasing of their ends product. So you can see most of the time they are going in a decreasing fashion across price, but some folks do purchase one across all price conditions. So those are probably our users of that are less than daily or use less frequently during the day. So our results should be interpreted cautiously, given our super small sample size. But it is interesting to note that no participant chose to purchase cigarettes at any ends prices, even though they were available to them. And the biggest accomplishment at this time is knowing that we can use the experimental tobacco marketplace to measure e-cigarette purchasing. In the past, and all the published papers are looking at cigarette purchasing with the substitution of e-cigarettes. So now we know that we get the same quantitative signature across price for e-cigarette purchases, and gives us some pilot data to suggest that this is a nice tool for measuring that. Thank you for listening. Thank you again, Castor, for the funding for this project, and I will take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for the excellent talk. So we do have a few questions that were provided in the chat, but please, if you haven't typed anything yet, please type your questions into chat or raise your hand, and we'll call on you to ask your question live. I'm going to ask, I guess, questions to one speaker at a time so everybody gets a chance to answer a question. There's a question for Andrew. Kim Skip Murray asks, is it known if the e-cigarette user were if the e-cigarette users were vape shop consumers versus purchasing at local retail locations, such as gas stations. I'm curious if the support from a vape shop helped people transition away from dual use.
Great, thank you for that question. I'll be honest that we did not look at purchase location. I was just checking the data since I saw the question in the chat, and we actually do have access to whether they purchased their e-cigarettes at either online, mall kiosks, vape shops, or gas stations, convenience stores. So that's something that we can look into in the future, and something that I'll make sure that I work with my collaborators when they move into the second Exhale cohort, hopefully funded in next year or so. I also want to respond to the second question, which if I can pull it up here, was about the role of product type in e-cigarettes. So I just wanted to share this table from our supplementary material, focusing on how e-cigarette characteristics impacted transitions from, for example, e-cigarette only to dual use, dual to cigarette only use, and dual to e-cigarette only use. So this dual to e-cigarette only use is, where we're primarily interested in that cigarette cessation kind of harm reduction. We did not see much impact or no significant impact of e-cigarette type, largely because there weren't a lot of diversity or in terms of flavor, at least for this particular transition. We did find that higher nicotine concentrations made it harder to move in that harm reduction direction, and meaning that they were more likely to stay dual users. I'm hopeful. So again, this work was pre-Juul, so we're hopeful to have a much more contemporary perspective based on the next planned Exhale cohort. So thank you for those questions.
Thank you, Andrew. The next question is for Shu. This is from Myrta. Do you have the opportunity to explore the reasons why people perceive e-cigarettes to be more or less harmful than cigarettes?
So far, we the numbers we put in the report is quite descriptive, and we didn't notice there's a broader body of literature talking about the harm perceptions, relative harm perception, absolute harm perceptions. So I think for the future study, we would like to learn why harm perception plays a role, and how the significant mediating role could inform the policy making. So the why component is interesting to us, but we currently we just focus on the data analysis phase.
Great, thank you, Shu. The next question is for Mona and Thuy. Thanks for the talk. Andrew Brouwer says, did you compare the metrics of your machine learning models to more traditional methods like GLMs, general linear models? It would be useful to see whether and by how much the ML models outperform traditional models.
So I can go first. Yes, I compared the metrics to I compared different algorithms to GLM, and actually it did very bad, especially because one of the biggest problems that we faced with this data was that the quit rate was very low, only 7%. So simple methods like GLM cannot handle this imbalanced data, and it did worse in all of our experiments than other algorithms. So basically that shows that other more sophisticated algorithms, it shows the merits of using those other more sophisticated algorithms in the case of our data.
Great. Thank you, Mona. Thuy, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so thanks, Andrew, for the question. I think Mona responded to the question well. So in my work, I did try, different methods, but they did not outperform the random forest. So, and I did not, record it, how much better the random forest comparing with other methods. But I think in Mona's work, she did compare those methods. So
great, thank you, Thuy. I think the next question may be to all participants, but maybe folks only working with young adult populations. Is there a universally accepted range of ages that defines young adults?
I can start. I think that's a great question. I think that's a question that we ask often. I defined my age range based on some other papers and based on the R01 that I have amongst young adults. But in psychology fame, Erik Erikson says that young adults are 18 to 40 even. So we don't use that definition much in tobacco regulatory science, but I'd say that there's a large range and it depends on who you ask.
Others want to chime in? Okay. Thank you, Amanda, for that response.
Yeah, so I think we would like to hear, some opinions from experts. Yeah, we also have some trouble with identifying, the age range for young adults.
I think this is an interesting question. So in my project, we used 18 to 24. It's because some of the past question was only asked among people who were 18 to 24. And also we have others, it's like 18 to 34. It's kind of like a combine other categories. But I really like this question and discussion, whether there's a more universal agreement on the age range. Just I want to say, so far, reviewer didn't challenge us why we selected those age groups, but I would like to know more about the theoretical thinking of the age range.
I guess I could chime in. I guess in my view, I think the young adult developmental period is a transition from adolescence to full adulthood. And I think it's culturally based, meaning that people are still establishing their careers, their professional identities, maybe starting to form a new family and those types of things. So once folks meet those types of social kinds of milestones, we may consider them moving into the young adult phase, the adult phase. I don't think it's defined biologically, but in terms of kind of social milestones, and they could be very different in different societies and different histories, different time periods. So the young adult phase, in my view, is expanding in the current modern era, as is the adolescent period. Adolescence, sometimes people argue, doesn't end at 17. 12 to 17 is what we usually study, but it could extend up until the beginning of independence from your parental family life. So those are just my thoughts around this issue. But this is an important issue, I think, and it's maybe cultural context specific. Okay, great question. The last question we have from the audience is from Kara Kiesling to Amanda. What is the market share of freebase and salt ends products?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer, but based on my data, I'd say the salt-based is cornering the market. But if anybody else has the answer to that question, I would love to hear if we know about the market share.
Is Alex Lieber here? I feel like he would know.
Yeah, he would answer that question. Great question. Maybe we'll leave that for another discussion. I have a question for all of you. Maybe you can take turns answering it before we end the session. Oh, Mona, you have a question. Go ahead.
I just have a very quick question from Violet. So I wanted to see, like, I think you considered waves 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 of PAT. And I wanted to see, have you considered that the Joule effects in your analysis? Because it might, the beginning of the Joule era might have some, unexpected effects. Maybe if you exclude that, or consider later waves or consider earlier waves, you're going to have other results. This is a suggestion plus a question.
So, Mona, thank you for the question. For our analysis, we use data from wave 1 through wave 4, and the Joule start to take the market starting from wave 4, I think, which is the time point we define for the outcome instead of exposure. Exposure was defined at wave 2, which was 2014 to 15. So so in terms of exposure, we don't have that issue, but I think in the long run, we would like to get more information from past data. So I think in the future study, when we take, we will move on to any recent waves of past data, but we will need to consider the effect of Joule.
Thank you so much.
Also the change of the market.
Great, thank you very much. We only have a couple of minutes, but maybe you can briefly, with maybe one sentence, answer this question. Some of our audience are folks who are just getting started in their research careers, or maybe are curious about tobacco regulatory science. You all being successful junior investigators in this area, do you have one or two pieces of advice you may want to give to somebody just getting started in this field? How about we start with Andrew and just go down the list of speakers?
Yeah, great. Sorry. Off the top of my head, I would say tobacco control, it's really great that it's such a well-funded field. And so there's a lot of opportunity. At the same time, I would say it can be a bit of a crowded field in that a lot of the kind of like low-hanging fruit have been plucked. And so you really want to make sure that you're clear and staking out your kind of own area of analysis. So kind of a positive and caution there.
Great, thank you. How about Shu?
Tobacco regulatory science is new to me, but I really appreciated the abundant funding opportunity in front of us. So, for example, currently I'm resubmitting my K award application. I really appreciate NIH keep funding this line of research. So, and meanwhile, I think for anyone who has a superhero in your heart, this is your opportunity, because what we do will make an impact to the whole society.
Great, thank you, Shu. How about Mona and Thuy?
In addition to what Andrew and Shu said, I should say that tobacco regulatory science is a well-developed field, but still you can use novel techniques. There is still opportunities to use novel techniques to look at the same problems. So I highly recommend doing that for people who are just starting. And as Shu said, I highly appreciate the fact that we can. There are so many funding opportunities in this field, and the fact that you're working in a field that you can make a difference in the world.
Right. Thank you, Mona. Thuy, any thoughts?
Yeah, so besides, great opinions from Andrew, Shu, and Mona, so I just want to add that. So I entered this field with, zero knowledge about, tobacco regulatory science, but you can, if you are interested in, you can learn as you go. Yeah, and so here there is still some room for you, and what you need to do is you need to find, an area that you are interested in, and you focus on it.
Great, thank you, Thuy. Amanda, anything you would like to add?
I would like to add that a lot of my opportunities arose when I got my RO3 grant. And so I would like to encourage people to work on grants outside of your normal work, which I know can be tough. And I also like to emphasize one of the pieces of advice one of my mentors gave me, which was work with people you like.
Excellent. Thank you all for great advice and your excellent talks. To the audience, thank you for coming and participating actively. We have one more session at 1:00 today that's focused on tobacco use disparities. So please join that session today. And all the materials from the talks will be presented on our website for the event. Thank you all. Have a great day and see you around.